What's up, guys? This is Justin, the Board Game Roamer, and we're here today to talk about Dungeon Crusade, Book 1, A Genesis of Evil, and its reprint. Dungeon Crusade is a game by Grievous Games Unlimited. Roger Deering is the designer, and this is a doozy. So, just to give you a little backstory on this, campaign is a reprint. I was a backer of the original game, and this is an awesome game. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I've really enjoyed it. And so, talking to Roger, he said he was doing the reprint, and I said, let me talk about it. And he said, cool, let's go for it. So today what I'm going to do is going to run you through kind of the features of the game, talk about the reprint, talk about some of the stuff that's changed from the original, some of the stuff you're going to see that's new with the reprint, just kind of give you an overall sense of the game, what all it's about, what are some of the features that we have, what are the things that are going on. So first thing I want to tell you about Dungeon Crusade. Dungeon Crusade is a ginormous game, okay? You're going to need some serious table space for this. It's worth it, but you're going to need some serious table space for this, especially if you're going to play with the, depending on the hero count. So you can play anywhere from 1 to 6 heroes, depending on whether you play solo or you want to play the full 6 hero count. So you're going to need a little space for it, but man, it is so awesome. I've got a lot of stuff laid out here, right? So you can kind of see a little bit of everything that's involved. So first thing I want to talk about, Dungeon Crusade is actually something else called the Avalon Adventure board game. So what you see out here, right, this board, all that's Dungeon Crusade, the regular Dungeon Crusade. Underneath this board is the Avalon Adventure board game. So what is the Avalon Adventure board game? So this is a, sort of think of it as a mini game that you can play by itself. And what you're going to be doing is your heroes, you start at Pyrrhic Hope's Reach, and what you're doing is you're traversing the lands of Avalon, you start in Hope's Reach, and you're running around, and you're kind of exploring, because the idea is you seed, there's 3 different regions, and there's these cards here that represent all the different places on the map, right? And you seed the regions. Each region has 3 stones, right? The rune stones. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for the 3 runes of Eternia that are going to essentially unlock, right, the dungeon that you'll play in. So you can do this as a standalone and just see, play and see how much money and the items you get. But the cool thing about the Avalon Adventure board game is it's a way to sort of preempt your dungeon crawl, right? So before you play Dungeon Crusade, you can do this. So what you can do is you're going to go to a location. You're going to draw a card for that location. So let's say that we go to, for example, Hunter's Watch here. When we go to Hunter's Watch, right, we're going to roll a D12 or a D6, depending on whether we've been there before or not. And that's going to have our card is going to tell us what happens, right? And sometimes it's going to be a battle. Sometimes you're going to find treasure. Sometimes you're going to find loot. Sometimes with the loot, there's 3 different decks over here. So there's a bronze, silver, and gold deck. And so all the money, all of the treasure that you find, and potentially even these rejuvenation potions, which you can't see because my big fat hand's in the way, are really important, because these only exist in the Avalon Adventure board game, right? And they regain you 3 health and 3 essence, okay? Because that's very important when you're playing the actual Dungeon Crusade. But you're going to play through this, and you're going to gain those money and those items. And so what's going to happen is you're going to be making some combat tests. You're going to be potentially making some skill tests. So the heroes that you're going to use all have attributes. So there's things like strength, intelligence, wisdom, or strength, wisdom, lockpicking, evasion, hiding. All these sorts of attributes are going to be tests that you take, and then you got warfare values when you do your combat that are essentially modifiers for when you do combat. And all of this is true also for the dungeon, when you go into the dungeon. But you're going to play with your heroes and go through that, And then when you get done, hopefully you find all the runes, you unlock the dungeon, and you're going to have some gold, you're going to have some items, hopefully, and those are going to be your starter items for the main dungeon quest. All right, so here is your dungeon. So let's talk about the dungeon first. So this is the dungeon. It's a 3x3 tiled grid. Let me show you one of these tiles. So this is the normal tile, right? So basically each tile has 4 quadrants, and you're going to see a lot of stuff. Let's pick one, maybe it's a little bit easier to see the stuff. You're going to see a lot of stuff going on this tile, okay? So let's turn it where you can read it. So all of the locations are going to have basically these vaults, right? So let's see, let's go over here. It's a little bit easier to see. Yeah. So you see, like, for example, there's the larder, right? All your locations are going to have things like spawn points, some skull piles. These have to do with movement. So your heroes are going to start. You got mining. There's all kinds of stuff. We'll get to a lot of that here in a second. This is just an overview. So what happens is you will have a scenario book. Now, you could create your own scenarios, but the game comes with a scenario book, and the scenario book is going to tell you exactly how to set up your dungeon, right? So you're going to see quest tables, you're going to see what dungeon it is, you're going to see seating, you're going to see the terror level, raid difficulty, all that sort of stuff. We'll cover all that in a second. But basically, each dungeon scenario is going to be using one of 4 dungeons. There are 4 dungeons in the game, and they are laid out in the back of the rule book. So you have the Ancient Ruins, you have the Tomb of Calidor, you have Castle Blackwood, and the Cavern of Lost Souls. So all those scenarios are going to have you set up that dungeon. And every dungeon is going to have 3 quest tables. And I'll show you the UI board. You'll understand that in a second. But the 3 quest tables consist of a main quest, a side quest, and then a Kill the Guardian quest, which is unique to, or not unique, but it's consistent across all the tables. So, for example, our quest table 1, we pick our heroes. Our quest table 1 here, the Baron's Wine. So you're going to see a whole lot of text in the front, so that's like the story. And then on the back, what's going to happen is it's going to tell you how to set up the dungeon, okay? And then when you complete the quest, there's some money and some life force, which is kind of like, basically think of it as XP that you're going to get for that. So what you see now, right, out here is you see a whole lot of doors, right? So you see all these doors out here. These are all chambers. And so you're going to look at your cards for each of your quest tables, right? And it's going to say, for example, right here it says, place 3 doors with red bases in each chamber of the ancient depths. Okay? So I would take, I've got some colored things here, right? So you would put a door, so I would say 3 doors with red bases in each chamber of the ancient depths. So I find ancient depths, and then I would take one of these red bases, and I would place them. So let's say, I know this is not, but let's just say that, where's the ancient depths on here? Is it close? I know it's close. Right over here. You can almost see it. Let's move you up just a little bit. There we go. There we go. So these 3 are the ancient depths. So I put these 3 doors on there. Bing, bang, boom. Do the other 3. And then I'm going to continue on. And this card is going to tell me, it says, take 3 level 1 monster tokens, empty chamber tokens, shuffle them, and you place 1. So you're going to have all kinds of different tokens. Okay, so let's talk about those for a second. So you're going to have monster tokens, so maybe level 1, 2, 3, or 4. You're going to have secret rooms. You're going to have all kinds of stuff. Chambers. So here's some quest items that are like empty, or not. That's not what I want. Where are they at? Did I put them up already? I guess I did. but you're going to have those tokens, and you're going to take those tokens. So what's going to happen is, you may end up that you've got a quest item, right? And this is the back of the monster token. And you're going to shuffle them up, and then you're going to put them out in here, and you're going to do the same thing, right? In all three of those chambers. And so the whole point of Dungeon Crusade, the game, is you're going to be working through the quest tables, okay? Sometimes you're going to have just monsters that you're going to kill. And in some cases, like for the Baron's Wine, you're going to have actual quest items that you're going to be mixing in. And sometimes maybe even with blank ones, right? So blank ones, you're going to mix all these together, right? Shuffle them up. And then you would distribute them across all the rooms. So you never know which room is going to have what. But you're trying to complete the quest tables is what you're trying to do. And so you're going to actually have 3 quest tables. Each quest table, like I said, is going to have a primary quest. It's going to have a secondary quest, okay? And you're going to basically be working to complete those quests. Some of the quests are just kill the monsters. Like I said, some of the quests are find items, okay? So that's going to be our goal. So now let's go over to the UI board. Let's talk about the UI board because that's going to give you a whole lot more information about how the game plays. And then we're going to look in detail about some of the stuff that's also in the dungeon as far as mining and spawn points, traps, stuff like that. All right, so I know that this is kind of like a zoomed out view of this. It kind of has to be because of what I've got going on, and I'll try to zoom in on some of this stuff here in a minute to make it a little bit more obvious. But part of the setup in your scenario is you have things like, you can see like village terror level, guardian spawn track, minion population, all those sorts of things, okay? So all of those things are tracked on these UI boards. So let's just kind of go through each of the boards. So here's your quest tables, right? So you have a main quest, a secondary side quest, and the Kill the Guardians quest. There's 3 of these quest tables. Bing, bang, boom. Level 1, level 2, level 3. So one of the other things about this is your level has to do with how many of these quest tables you completed. So you start out at level 1, and then your maximum level is the number of completed quests plus 1. So since you completed no quests, obviously your max level to begin with is 1. Once you complete this table, you can level everybody up to level 2, and then eventually level 3, and then compete and complete the last quest table. So we have our quest tables. As we complete our quest, either clearing out dungeon spots, either finding items, or killing the number of guardians that we need, we're going to flip these tokens over. You're going to see there's a cleared book, right? So once all of these have been cleared, then we flip this token over. That tells us, hey, it's a green Elder Globe. That says, hey, this has been completed. There's basically there's a teleport track. So you'll have essentially, once you check in the order of things for the round in, or maybe it's in the upkeep. But you're going to check, and you're going to have like a countdown. So 3 rounds, 2 rounds, 1 round, and then you're going to teleport to the village. So when you get to the village, right, you're going to have what they call Celebration Day. So there's a deck of cards here. They're all Celebration Day. You shuffle them up. You're going to draw one of these cards. Now, I'm not going to show you these cards. Some of these cards will give you money. Some of these cards will give you nothing. Some of these cards will give you potentially items, right? So that's what those cards do. So you get one of those, and then all the money, all the stuff that you have, you can sell. You can buy stuff with your money at the blacksmith up here, which I'll talk about in a second. And so that's how you're going to gear yourself up. You have down here, so there's some programming things that happen over here. Minion population. So if we go back just for a second, and let's look at that. So when you're looking at the board in the dungeon, you kind of got a couple different things going on. Okay, so you've got these chambers, right? And then you've got all the other stuff that aren't chambers. So just regular regular dungeons that are going on. So what's going to happen is you're going to have minions. They're called minions. They're going to be moving around right in these chambers. Okay, and then you're going to have, like I said before, you're going to have some quest stuff going on. Sorry, in the dungeon, you're going to have them moving around. And then inside of the chambers, you're going to have these tokens to complete your quest. Of course, imagine that there's doors here. So the minion population, think of these as kind of like trash mobs. So they're moving around in the dungeon all over the place, and you're just encountering them as you're moving around in the dungeon. So there's the dungeon tiles, and then there's the chambers. So think of these as really separate spaces, because once you go in these, the combat that happens outside of those and the combat that happens in the dungeon and the combat that happens inside the chambers are different. The mechanics are the same, but if you've got enemies that are walking around out here, or the Guardian, which is just a really powerful enemy, you're going to do normal combat out here. You do one round, and then you're going to spend your actions that you've got. You get 2 actions on your turn to do that. Chamber combat is a fight to the death, right? Because you're trying ultimately to defeat the monster and then flip this over and see, is this a quest item that I need? Maybe maybe I was looking for the Baron's wine in here, perhaps. Well, that wasn't it. I thought it was in there. It wasn't. So now I've got to go search for it, somewhere out in the dungeon. So that's kind of what that is. But this minion population is going to determine how many enemies. It's down here. How many enemies are going to be on the board right at the beginning, essentially, of your. What happens at the end of the turn structure, but essentially, how many of these are going to be out there, and how many of these you're going to have to be dealing with. Okay, so that's what this board does, and you can track that. There's these markers that you can use to track. That's there. Raid difficulty. So one of the things that happens with the minions is you have a siege tile, which is a space that you enter the dungeon on. If these minions become raiding, and there is a marker for that, if they become raiding, or if you move within so close of a minion it becomes raiding as well, then they're going to head towards the village. And so there's a terror level that we will look at here in a second. But if that gets too high, then you lose the game, right? So this says, well, you roll a d20, and that's going to tell you whether they raid. So you can. One of the cool things about this is that you can adjust the difficulty, right? And Roger is very much all about like customizing your game. So you can make it completely random, right? Because if you remember, I talked about the book, right? This book, without the glare, this book has all of these tables. So you could roll a d6 and you could change the terror level, the raid difficulty, the Guardian spawn track, the Guardians per quest, the minion population, how much stuff is in the inventory, the bazaar inventory, the blacksmith inventory, like all of that sort of stuff you can change if you really wanted to. Or you can just pick a level, like for example, you could say, well, maybe I want it to be novice, maybe I want it to be easy, normal, hard, expert, master. So you could pick the level, like right here, and you could say, well, I want it to be normal. So you just follow that whatever's down that 3 all the way down the line. And then for the blacksmith's inventory, follow that 3 all the way down the line and tell you where all of your dials and knobs are going to be set, how much stuff's going to be in the inventory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what that does. Guardian spawn. So every round, you're going to roll a d20 and see if a Guardian spawns into the dungeon. And once you do that, this number counts down until you spawned in as many Guardians as you decided you want. So maybe it's 2, maybe it's 4. This just keeps dropping, and then once you get the last Guardian, you don't spawn anymore. But that's how you complete. Remember the Kill the Guardians quest? You're going to have that number. That's how you're going to complete this quest, ultimately. This board right here, you can't see quite as well, so let's let you get a little bit better shot of that. So this board is something that you can use for combat, and I'll talk about combat and give you an example here in a second. But this combat, you essentially, everybody, let's you know what? Let's just talk about combat now since we're here. Let's talk about combat. So, before we talk about combat, let's talk about monsters. So, like I said, there are minions. So these are the trash mobs that roam the dungeon. There's 3 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, and that's going to depend on which quest table you're working on. So, when I first start the game, they're all going to be level 1s, and then when I complete level 1, when I go back into the dungeon, they're all going to be level 2s, etc., etc. The anatomy is actually the same on all the cards. Okay, so you have they're all versed in some sort of warfare. You remember when we talked about Avalon Adventure board game, we have these warfare values in here, right? So you can see all those there. So that's what we're going to use to fight them. So like I said, you have minions. So these are the guys that are moving around in the dungeon. Then the second type we have are called champions. And champions are the ones that you fight in the chamber. So they're going to be a little bit more, generally a little bit more maybe difficult, right? That's a level 3. That's horrible. Don't get scared. Start with this, right? So there they are. So you can see the anatomy is the same. They have 3 different warfare values that are going to deal with your combat. They've got life force that they're going to potentially give you, health, and then if you need to run away, there's a check you make, and then there's a loot roll that happens when you defeat them for gold and items, right? And that's what that is. And then, of course, some of them have special abilities that trigger at different times, right? Before combat, on defense, on attack, etc., etc. So you're going to be fighting those. You're also going to be fighting guardians, and these guys are a little bit beefier. Okay. So you can see again, there's level 1, 2, 3, all the way up to level 4 guardians, and they're just got a lot more hit points, a lot more health. Of course, this is a level 3 version, but they got a pretty big number to hit, right? One of the things that I do want to point out, so that's I'll talk about movement in a minute. That's what that is. You're going to have encounter cards, which you can see over here. So the encounter cards are important because that's kind of like a timer for the dungeon, okay? You're going to have 40 cards, essentially, that are like a timer for your quest. I've never gotten anywhere close to using all the encounter cards, okay? So don't worry about what if I run out, unless you're just not attempting to complete the quest. So you have encounter cards, and those are going to be things that are just like, at the beginning of the turn, you're going to draw it. It may be something that changes your environment. It may be some sort of test that one of your people, your heroes, do. It may be you just get lucky and find something, right? So it's kind of like those narrative events that just give more flavor and to the story, right, of your traversing the dungeon. You have treasure chests, so if you do manage to get treasure, right, there's some locations that you can go over in the dungeon that have these treasure chests. We'll talk about those in a minute. So you can get those. You've already seen the celebration day. You have mining, all right? So one of the cool things about this game, too, is that you can mine. So scattered throughout the dungeon are going to be these mining tokens that are going to be out in the dungeon. So you're going to shuffle these up or you're going to put them out. Now sometimes you're going to flip them over and you're going to find out, oh, this is not a mining site. So there's basically 4 mining sites represented by these 4 decks, okay? And so as part of your actions, what you can do is you can actually mine locations. So here's an example. We've got a treasure chest and a mining location. So as my hero is moving around, I move and I land on this treasure chest. I pick it up and then I draw, something from this treasure chest deck, right? And it could be a trap. It could be money. There's a lot of different things it could be. Or I should say, and also as I'm moving it, I go to this mining site, flip it over. So it may say no mining or it may say site C. So that says, there's A, B, C, and D. So then I can spend actions if I've bought a pickaxe, which there's a whole mechanic for making it like degrade over time. So like you eventually have to buy it again because it gets dull. But I can dig through these cards. And so these cards are going to give me, just show you, these cards are going to give me different types of gems, moonstones, rubies, etc., etc. And eventually I'm going to hit one of these cards. So this says the mining site's exhausted, right? So this stops you from mining that place until you complete the quest table that you're on. And then the next time around, what's going to happen is all those places that you have this flipped up because you leave it face up on the deck, right? You're going to remove it so it would be like this. So you've done some mining and then you get to this. Then you're going to remove it. And then when you start on the next quest table, then you're going to start flipping them over and trying to get, the different items. All right. Why is that important? I am glad you asked. Because part of the mining in this game includes these. So we'll look at the weapons and items and stuff like that in a minute. But you can actually take and make these gems. Like there's recipes, right? So this tells you what you need. Like in this case, you need one of these moonstones, one of these zanites, and then one of these purple ones. And you can create this amethyst prowess gem that you can slot in certain weapons, armor, amulets, necklaces, items to increase your warfare values, right? Sometimes they increase your warfare values, okay? Sometimes they're going to give you increases to your attributes because again, you're not just doing combat in this game. There are skill tests that have to be made. And sometimes those skill tests have to do with these encounter cards. So you may have an encounter card that gives you a skill test, or you may have a minion, right, that says, make some sort of skill test at the beginning of battle or whatever. So there's mining in this. It's everything. I think that's everything on there. We'll talk about the specifics here in a minute of items, and then I will talk about movement because that is something that has changed with this reprint as far as the way that works. All right, so now let's talk a little bit. That covers this board. So the second board we have is the village. So in the village, this is going to be where you have different places. You got the House of Chance. We'll talk about that in a minute. You have the temple where you can get blessings. You can get rid of afflictions, which are these negative consequences. Again, it's on a failing some attribute tests, and some enemies will put those on you if you do that. You can get blessings, which some of the blessings are good. Sometimes you can pay for a blessing, and when you get in there, because you don't know what you get when you first get it, right? So there's a little bit of a question mark there until you get in the dungeon. You have a bazaar where you can buy items that let you heal afflictions that you get, lets you get health and essence, which are what is going to power your health, obviously. We know what that is. Your essence is going to power your special skills. There's the academy. So when we talk about heroes, we're going to need to talk about each hero has 3 abilities with 3 levels that they can use, right? And so, for example, here we have a ranger. He has the ability Shadow Stalker, Hidden Dagger, and he has one more. And when you play, you only use 2 of these. You randomly discard one. So they have access to 2 abilities during the game. But you're going to basically purchase these abilities with the XP and the life force that you get. They're going to do something. They're going to have a cost and essence. So that's kind of like the 2 statistics that you've got on your player board, your hero board. And then, where can you use it? Is it like you can spend it as long as you have essence, or is it like a one-time deal, which is what this arrow is? Like this says I can use it in the dungeon, but I can't use it in a chamber combat. So when I'm fighting for those quest mobs, I can't use it, but I can use it in the dungeon. And I can only use it once on my turn, right? Because that green red arrow down says channel it, which means basically exhaust it. If I've got one that's green, then as long as I can spend, for example, here, as long as I can spend the essence, I just keep spending it until I don't have any essence to spend. So that's what the Academy does, which is really, really awesome. You have the Tavern, where you can rent rooms. So when you complete a quest table, like a lot of times in a lot of games, you're going to be like, everybody heals up, et cetera, et cetera. Not in this. You've got to go to the tavern. You got to go to the temple to get blessed. You got to go to the tavern to rest and recoup. You've got your blacksmith. So, I'll just take these. There are 5 different, well, we'll say technically 6 different types of items, okay? And the items will all have a tier. There's 3 tiers, and depending on your level, and the tier will tell whether you can equip that item. So like a tier 1 can be equipped by level 1, but a level 1 can't use anything but tier 1s. Level 2 can use tier 2s and tier 1s. Level 3 can use anything, right? So you have all these items, and then you can see, right, there's amulets, there's rings, there's weapons, etc., etc. They'll have a gold cost to buy from the blacksmith. So this is what you're going to be spending your money on. And in some cases, like here, for example, you're going to have weapons that have slots. So those mining that you do when you're crafting those items, there's different shapes. So there's circle, square. Depending on which one you make, as long as the shape matches, you can slot it in here. So I could take, for example, find a good example. I could take, here we go. This is probably a good example. Yeah. So I could take this recipe, right? If I had a Jade Prowse gem, if I had the moon, the Zanite, and one of these emeralds, could craft it, right? And then because this is a circle, it's going to match. So I'm just going to slot that in. Boom. Now I've enhanced this weapon, right? And now it's not just a +1 to my warfare roll. Now it's a plus another 2, so +3. And the cool thing about all of this is, like, it doesn't matter when I'm fighting or if I'm doing a test. Everything that I have equipped, it could be armor, it could be rings, it could be items or weapons, it could be amulets. All of that gets added, right, to my rolls. So it's really cool that, like, everything that you get kind of, works together to help you do what you need to do. So you've got all these different tiers of items, and of course, some items give you damage, like this +2 damage. That just means that you're doing 2 damage. And then some items will give you warfare things. Some of these, like this is +1 to hide and +1 to willpower with this bow. So you got all kinds of stuff like that that's going to help you. But yeah, that's what these boards, all these boards track. All right, now out here on the main board, like I said earlier, we talked a little bit about these, right? So you have these quests. You're gonna fill up the chambers that it mentions, but there's gonna be some chambers that these quest cards don't cover. And I should mention, when you set up this dungeon board, you're not just setting like one quest table up. You're doing all 3 quest tables. So I would have actually 6 of these cards that I would do for setup, and then I would have a whole bunch of chambers that I hadn't used that are empty. So the scenario book will tell you, depending on the scenario, there is a section, okay, right here in the corner called seating, all right? So it's going to put out things like monsters, chambers. Now let's talk about some of this other stuff. We have mystery chambers, we have crates, we have secret rooms. So the crates and the mystery chambers, okay, those are items that are going to be out there. And essentially, you're going to have a bag or a cup or something that you're going to pull when you go into these rooms. Once you clear it out of enemies in the chambers, you're going to draw out of that bag, right? And that bag is going to say, it's going to have some good stuff in it. It may have some money. It may have some items. It's going to have some stuff that's just, you don't find anything. And it may have, some negative stuff. Like I did a practice playthrough earlier. So through the first quest table, and because I'm going to do a full playthrough of this as part of this campaign, this reprint, and I drew a trap that did a whole lot of damage because I rolled really bad. both times to the heroes when I was like searching a crate, and I think one time searching a room, a mystery chamber. So it can be good or bad, right? It's not all great. Okay, so you got to make that calculus, right, as you're going through the dungeon. And the same thing for the treasure cards. The same thing, for the enemies and stuff like that, or the chamber card or the chambers, these quest items. Sometimes not quest items, the crates and mystery chambers. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But you're going to seed all the other locations, and that seeding process is going to fill up all the chambers. Okay, and like I said, ultimately your goal is to complete the 3 quest tables. Once you've completed the 3 quest tables, your adventure's over. There's no points or anything like that. It's just completing it without all of your heroes. Your heroes can die. There is a way to bring them back, and that doesn't end the game. The terror level will determine, if the terror level gets all the way to the end, that's really what would end the game, so to speak, and you'd have to start all over. So, cool. I should talk about this. So one of the things, let me go. I didn't talk about this. You also have tavern tasks each quest table that are kind of random, like you meet in the tavern and it's somebody that wants you to do something. So you can see those, and so you're going to have a random one of those that you complete just for more XP, more life force, right, to have you be able to spend to learn your skills and to boost your level up. So one of the other things, I should talk about this. There's so much to talk about. So one of the other things that's part of this, I'm just going to show you one example. When you do Celebration Day, so once we've gone in, we completed our quest, you can play a House of Chance game. So there are, depending on which, package you get, right? The base game comes with 1 House of Chance. You can get some additional Houses of Chance. But there's these Houses of Chance games that are kind of like mini games that are going to let you essentially spend some money and kind of like gamble and bet in different ways. There's a tower attack. There's kind of like waves of monsters that you fight. There's so Robin, like almost like it's not really a pinball, but it's kind of like, it reminds me of a pinball machine. Just kind of all this stuff, the 80s vibe that there is. And you can play through those right in between to get some more money to buy stuff over here in the board. But when the original game came out, it's if you play it straight up, this game is not designed to be easy. Okay, this game is very much it's doable. I don't want to sit here and tell you that it's not doable, but it's definitely tactical. Right now, fortunately, there are different levels, right? So when we saw the scenario book, we can choose what levels that we play at, easy, novice, and we can make it as easy or as hard as we want. But one of the things about the environment cards, the treasure cards, if you have to do checks and stuff like that, treasure chest, events, challenges in the encounter deck, those things, like some of those numbers are really high. It can be higher numbers. And if you're level 1 especially, and you've got to roll, you usually roll in a D20, like you don't have a lot of stats to begin with to help you boost your roll to hit a higher threshold like a 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So one of the things that Roger did is he introduced a scalable difficulty card, right? So basically, depending on your level, 1, 2, or 3, if you're level 1, you're going to deduct 6 from certain types of rolls. At level 2, deduct 3, and then at level 3, you don't deduct anything. But that just makes those checks a little less punitive. Now, if you want it to be tougher, right, you can completely not use that. That is totally optional. You don't have to use that. So looking at the heroes, I'll just use it as an example. You remember I talked about one of their stats, right, is movement. So on their turn, they're going to get 2 actions, and they can use actions to do fighting. They can do a lot of different things. But one of the things that they can do is move. So normally you would roll a d6, you would add that modifier, and that's how many spaces that they can move. But one of the things that does, especially when you start talking about like a full six hero complement, and you've got, if you had like 7 or 8 minions and like 3 or 4 guardians, and then all of your heroes, all 6 heroes on their turn, rolling those movement is fine. It just takes a lot longer. So one of the cool things that Roger's done is this new edition, he has made blitz movement. So basically what blitz movement does is instead of having to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we still do that, right? We still have a base movement. But our monsters, including guardians and minions and our heroes, all get what's called blitz movement, which essentially means we can move from somewhere on this quadrant to orthogonal quadrant, anywhere on it, right? Following a path like we were moving to make sure line of sight and other traps and treasure chests and mining stuff, all that sort of stuff, we trigger it or see it the way we're supposed to. But we can move, like if we were right here, for example, with the blitz movement, we could use the blitz movement to get all the way over to here, and then we could do our normal movement. Now, the thing is, since it's a D6, right, you could use your 2 action movements. Let's say you had a D6 plus 3. If you rolled a 1 both times, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd only be here. And if you're trying to get like down here, that's 1 round, two, maybe 3 rounds, depending on how well you roll. And that's just like in a small area. If you're way over here and you got to go all the way down here for a quest or to do whatever you're trying to do, that eats up a ton of time. Like I said, this game is big. This game is not necessarily short, but if you play with the blitz movement, which is new, then that is going to significantly cut off a lot of time because you're jumping around to where you need a lot faster. Also, there's 2 different types of combat. There's classic combat, where each enemy, you're going to pick out their 3. Let's say these are their 3 warfare values, and you're going to roll with all 3 of these based on their weapons. That takes a little time to process that, especially if you have like multiple enemies in a chamber, which can happen. So one of the other things that he added after the original print was some revised combat. So it speeds the combat up. So you basically you do one of the warfares, and then you roll a d20 for what is called a critical strike or first strike. Is it first strike? Anyway, it's not a warfare roll, but it's a way to do another damage with a weapon, and it's not limiting like in the classic combat for each time you attack it with one of the warfare types. So, for example, if these are the 3, right, I can only carry 2 weapons, which means at most I can only attack in 2 of these. Okay, so I'd have to do what's called a rally, which essentially, when you're taking your turns, you can have other heroes join you to participate in the combat. Like that's how I would only be able to do all 3 of these, right? So that's the combat is really fun. It's different. It's not just a D20. So you roll. When you're looking at the minions and the guardian, all of the combat's like this. You have a target value. So in this case, like you have a type. So in this case, it's spiritual. You have a target value, and then basically you're rolling a D6 and a D12, right, for whatever that type is. So I roll this D6 and D12. I'd add it together, add any modifiers I've got for my weapons, items, armor, and the spiritual category. And as long as I can beat an 11, right, then I'm going to do however much damage my weapon does. If I fail, then I take 1 damage. So there is armor, right, in the game, but it's not armor that reduces defense. Armor is just another item that's going to increase your warfare rolls, and those increased warfare rolls are going to be what keeps you, hopefully, rolling high enough to not fail and take that damage. So yeah. So like I said, we've got the heroes. We have all the different tiers of weapons and items and armor. Your heroes can go up to level 3. So they start at level 1, and they go up to level 3. So you can see, like, for example, here, all their stats increase a little bit. So we've got level 2, he's got an 11 and a 15, right? He's got, we'll look at the warfare, -2 to chaos, +5 to arcane, +1 to spiritual. He levels up, he's got a -2 to chaos still, but he's got a +6 to his arcane, +1 to spiritual, so that didn't really change. But all these numbers are going to increase, right? Also, one of the kind of unique things that's part of this is Albus. So Albus is kind of like an NPC, a fetch hound, and essentially what he can do, which I think is super cool, is that he's called a fetch hound. So you can tell kind of from the art, he's going to go into the dungeon and he's going to fetch things out of the dungeon for you. So, and he can level just like everybody else. So he can carry some number of potions, items, and gold. And so you can actually have him run around in the dungeon and you can hand him off items, potions, money, and then he also has like a huge running stat, right? Movement stat. And he can actually run back to town. He can spend the money basically and collect weapons, items, that sort of thing, and bring them back out into the dungeon to give to you. So it's a way like as you're fighting, so you're not just stuck with what you start out with, and you don't have to wait till you get to a celebration day to come out and get more stuff, because you need to be constantly gearing up as best you can. Now, celebration day is when you do a lot of that, but that's how that works. All right, guys, before we end this video, I want to double back on two things that I think are important, because a lot of the reprint has to do with these two things. I just want to hit one more time what the Blitz movement is and how it's different, and one other thing. So normally, just to go over movement again, normally you can see here on the board, we have these skull piles and we have these spawn points, right? So as we're going through the dungeon, minions are going to spawn in these spawn points, and as they move, they're going to move along these lines to either a skull pile or a spawn point. And so we actually have dice. Here are the dice. There are D8s with different colors. Originally, they had these feet, and then there were some additional dice that were available later on that had the skulls. But that's going to help determine where we're going to go, or where a minion is going to go, or a guardian is going to go when they hit this spot. So, for example, if a minion landed here on this 5, we would roll the die, right? And if we rolled, let's say we rolled an orange result. Well, okay, well, let's go with green. So I rolled a green result, then it would continue to move down this green path, and it would get to this skull pile. Now, some piles may have, like this one has all 4 of the colors and directions. Some only have a couple directions, so you can see here, blue or green both follow this path. Here, purple and orange both follow that path. So that's how that's gonna happen. And then also movement as it relates to minions. When they become raiding and they're trying to get out of the dungeon, they're gonna follow, instead of following these paths, they're gonna take the shortest distance to get back to the siege tile. So these arrows will give them direction. So on some quadrants, you can see that doesn't have an arrow. That means like that's the direction that they need to go. And then some tiles, they could, have an option. So maybe they go this direction first and then down, or you roll and maybe they go down here. And then maybe the next time they go over here or down here. But you can see like over here, this is getting closer to the exit. So there's no options, right? So that's just, they always go down. They always go down. So I wanted to just kind of highlight that again right quick. Second thing I want to highlight is one of the things that is different with this reprint as well is the seeding phase, the seeding process. So in the traditional rules, whenever you clear out the dungeons, right, as you go out here and we start clearing out these areas that are non-quest areas, because like I said, there's only, part of the dungeon will be quests, the other part will be random stuff. You're going to clear out the treasure chest. You're going to clear out all that, all these rooms. And in the traditional game, those just stayed empty. So like the dungeon kind of got where there wasn't a lot in it. Now you might use those chambers maybe to evade, but you didn't have anything in them when you went back in. You kind of like cleaned out the dungeon. And so Roger, because a lot of people said, well, that's kind of, that's cool, but it'd be nice if there was something in there, because it just kind of is anticlimactic, I guess you would say, when you go back in. Because you can do all the quests and stuff in any order, right? So if you manage to be able to complete like a level 2 quest, right, while you're still level 1 somehow, like, you're just that much further ahead. But there's a seeding process, and the rules aren't final yet. We're looking at those, but basically there'll be some randomness where we'll potentially add stuff back into these chambers, monsters back into the chambers, crates into the chambers. We'll add treasure chests and stuff back out in the dungeon, so you get some more of that process, that seeding. So it doesn't feel like once you go through, like the dungeon just continues to shrink, right? So I think that's important. That's important to note as well. And man, let me tell you about the items. Just going to mention this. There is a freaking fat stack, dude. There's I want to say it's like 193 pieces of loot. So you have all kinds of different items. There are some items that are extremely powerful, that do tons of damage, but like literally when you use it, you have to spend experience to use it, and then you have to make a death save. Essentially, if you don't roll high enough, you die, right? They give you like ridiculous things. There's legendary items, and it's pretty cool because all the legendary items, like that yellow there, that legendary item, a lot of it's tied to the lore. So if you're reading the backstories and you're reading of the characters, you're reading the encounter cards and the setup cards and all that, it's going to give you a ton of backstory on the world that Dungeon Crusade is. And the other part, some of the other stuff you'll find, which I think is hilarious, is sometimes you're going to find what is called junk loot. Like you may like do a battle and you roll for loot and you're like, yes, and then you find a shabby pillow. That's what you find. It's junk. Doesn't do anything for you. Doesn't give you anything. It's just one of those things. So Dungeon Crusade, super awesome. Recap, you've got the Avalon Adventure board game that you can play on its own. I would recommend that you play and use that as your starting point for the Dungeon Crusade playthrough with the dungeon, the scenario that you've picked. Because honestly, if you do pretty decent in that, fairly decent, you're going to start out with most of the gold you would probably start out with anyway, and some items, and starting out with extra items, especially if you can find items that are like your tier to begin with, or maybe the tier up, is going to save you a ton of money. When you level up, then you don't have to buy them. It's great. One other thing I need to talk about, I forgot to talk about this, secret rooms. So there are a couple of secret rooms, two or three secret rooms you can find out here on the board. And they have basically, there's a roll, like a perception roll that you make. You can try it to a certain number of times to find them. And then once you find them, you have to actually see if you can unlock the door that's in it. So there's like a little, there's another mechanic where you're rolling the D6s to try to unlock the door. And there's stats, like you have a trap, or not a trap, a lockpick stat that will give you extra rolls, right, on your heroes, depending on who's doing it. So there's just a lot of stuff going into Dungeon Crusade. It's a great game. It is a big game. It is a long game, although with the blitz movement and the revised combat, it is a lot shorter than it would be normally. The cool thing about it is you've got a lot of choice. You've got a lot of freedom. You can get an additional pack with extra characters, so you can double the number of characters that you could play. You can get 2 more harder levels of champions, minions, and guardians. You've got all the variability that you have on the UI board, so you can kind of custom tailor this to your playstyle. If you want it to be more casual and you really just want to play to have fun, and not worry about dying. You can play on the easier levels. And listen, let's say that you decide, I'm playing, and I've done this. I've played, and I've had, let's say, my minion counts at like 5, and I'm like, this is nice. I don't really feel any pressure. Maybe I say I want a little bit more pressure. I can up the minion track. I can do a population track and say, I want to make it a little bit more difficult. I can say with the Guardian, maybe I said 2 Guardians. Maybe I'm feeling like maybe this time I want to do 3, right? So there's a lot of customization that you can do, a lot of tinkering that you can do with this to make it feel to whatever level you want it to be. You can make it just a fun dungeon romp where you're just going through killing stuff, doing the quest, and you're just doing it to have fun. Or you can make it a lot more tactical, a lot more strategical, challenging by amping up the number of minions because that's more chance to raid. Amping up the number of guardians. Having less potions and healing to use. Having fewer items in the blacksmith, so you've really got to make those rolls for loot and money count. So there's tons and tons of options. Right. I think that's everything. There's a lot there to unpack, but hopefully this gives you an idea. So this Kickstarter is ongoing, and I think you guys are going to be really excited about this. This game is an awesome game. It takes a lot of table space. It's going to take a little bit of dedication as far as that goes. The rule book is longer rule book because there's a lot of stuff going on. There is a whole solo mode if you want to do that and play that way. You can do that too. But it's going to take a little dedication to get through everything because there's a lot of little bitty levers and stuff that you can pull. But at the end of the day, it's totally worth it. So I hope you guys have a better idea of how this plays. Like I said, I was an original backer. I fell in love with the game. And I got a chance to see the solo rules and the revised combat and all that stuff and the blitz movement. Don't want to misrepresent anything. I didn't have a hand in crafting those rules. I've gave feedback on the blitz stuff and even the solo and the revised edition combat when it happened. So, hopefully this guys gives you an idea, and hopefully this will help you make an informed decision on whether or not to back. My vote, if you can, back it, because I think it's going to be awesome. And if you've not played it, it is worth it. And if you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the video, subscribe, put them in the comments. And I will be helping Roger in the comment section of Kickstarter 2 and trying to help answer those questions and help you guys get what you need if this is something that you're considering. So, that's all I got, guys. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. Check out the Kickstarter campaign and see what's out there. And thank you guys for hanging out with me. Stay awesome. Play more games. And I will see you, my friends, in the next video. Bye, guys.